I read 25 books this year, and these are my favorite 10, and some of these even made it to my favorite books of all time. And let's start right with the top 10. In this case, we have a book that was recommended to me because it was short, it was cozy, it was amazing, and honestly, it's been a long time since I wanted to read these. It was crazy, it was funny, it was a little bit silly, but in the best way. Howl's Moving Castle. I was shocked by the fact that the author actually learned from C.S. Lewis and also Tolkien, and that it was kind of like the same school, because this book just feels cozy and feels smart and feels wonderful. There's this twist that you kind of see coming, but at the same way, it has such an incredible story. It makes something that for me, it's nuts, which is that one of the main protagonists here, in this case, Howl, he is so not likable, but at the same time, he is so incredibly likable that that is a masterpiece in writing. It's quite short, reads really fast, and it's silly, but it's wonderful, and it will just make you feel like all that fuss, all that whimsy. It's a wonderful story. I have not watched the movie, but let me know if you have and if you believe the book is better or not. Top 9, we have a standalone that the first time that I tried to read it, I thought was one of the worst things that I read. However, I gave this book another try. I was started reading it, and this story mesmerized me. I fully acknowledge that it's not going to be for everyone.
Definitely not.
Especially, you need to be in a certain mood. You need to be kind of like in a mood to reflect, to read something that it's beautiful. It is kind of a borderline purple prose at times, and you need to trust the process. You will see something will happen, something will unfold, and definitely does. I was mesmerized by the beauty of it, and it's a story that once I finalized it, I've come to love the story even more. And this is How You Lose the Time War. It's a dual point of view story, and it is incredibly unique because we don't truly follow characters or their names. We follow these blue and red characters, and they are in opposite sides of a time war. There's this kind of like time travel shenanigans when they go back and forth in time, and they are almost enemies to lovers, star-crossed something. It is beautiful. They are these unique souls that find solace in themselves, in trying to outsmart them in every move of this war. And it was really beautiful, but also it's a little bit weird. If you start reading it, you don't feel like it, leave it. Might like it in the future
or not.
Top 8, we have a book that was widely recommended by Daniel Green, and it was pitched as one of those stories that will surely get you out of a reading slump, that it's funny, that it's lighthearted, but at the same time the topics are quite dark, but it has that action scenes, and it is a little bit of a Dungeons and Dragons kind of story. In this case, we have Dungeon Crawler Carl. This story really surprised me because it was very emotional. The premise seems that we've been attacked by aliens, and the result is that world has collapsed, and now everything that remains is underneath, and we need to pass these different levels in order to survive. And it's a little bit of the Hunger Games, and it's so funny, but at the same time, again, it's like hard to read. We have this main character Carl, and he's so relatable, he's so like mundane in a way, and then we of course have his cat, which is, yes, a princess. She becomes sentient, and the story unfolds. They need to pass these different dungeons, these different scenes, and you see how they get powerful, how they face these different bosses. It's the perfect read if you're looking for something that will read fast and that will transport you to a world where things are kind of like hilarious in a good way. Top 7, we have a standalone that is one of the most fast-paced stories that I've read in my life. I was not able to put this down. I clearly remember myself reading it and resenting having life and not being able to just close things and stop everything and start reading, because it's definitely the story that will demand you to just cancel everything and start reading. It's a story that also plays with what if you can take other paths in your life. What if you're not happy, but you resent maybe a decision that you made in the past? Would you be able to go to that life and to travel to that moment in order to fix that? Will you be happier then? And that story, it's Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. It's a sci-fi story that really touches on the time travel shenanigans, so you kind of need to be prepared for that. But even if you are not a super sci-fi hardcore lover, I believe that you will enjoy it because it's also a thriller. It is super fast, and this author has this unique ability to also craft characters that are deeply emotional and really they love deeply. So you see this insane setting, this insane high stakes, but at the same time what you will see is that our character suffers and that there's a very profound links with their family, and how that settles and how the story changes will profoundly change you. At least it did to me. It's a story that will make you reflect on your life and what you have, and it is really good. If you are again in a reading slump, please pick this one up. So easy to read, but at the same time it's not a forgettable story. It's
quite the opposite.
Top 6, we have a story that had me laughing out loud. I started listening to this book via audio and I was like, no, I need to read this physically because there's just so many little things done in such a masterful way that I need to savor that. And in this case, what I got is another standalone that it just is the perfect blend. If you want action, if you want character-driven but also plot-driven story with the perfect humor. It's not going to be for every type of humor, but if you like satiric, dark humor and just this blend of characters that are naive, but at the same time are like quite savvy and they do know that they don't want to do stuff, this is going to be that for you. And it is Guards by Terry Pratchett. It fascinated me from beginning to end. It's just so funny. I don't believe I will ever be able to forget these characters, right? Like they really are something. This belongs as part of the Discworld, and more stories from the City Car happen afterwards, but you can read this as a standalone because the story starts and ends and it is very fulfilling. It is very funny, and a story that will transport you to that fantasy core element of wizards, but also dragons, and we will be fighting the very bad evil creatures, and it is good, very good. Highly recommend. Top 5, we have a story that it's way more plot driven than character driven, but it works really good. It's more of a quest and it only has one point of view, but it's very adventurous because we will be able to see different fantasy creatures like genes, and the story has such a beautiful world building, and this author, it's also a master at creating this whimsical story. The love that you see poured into the words, it's almost whimsical, it's mesmerizing. It has an easiness for you to start reading this and be transported into that world, into the scene that you're seeing, into the love, the fights, the adventure, the high stakes, and that is The Adventures of Amina Al-Sirafi. This is the same author that wrote the Devavat trilogy, which I only read the first book, but you already know that she is good at her craft of writing. In this case, we will be following Amina, and she is an adult character. She is a mother, and I love that about this book. Although we see how our character, of course, makes a lot of mistakes, those mistakes come from some reasoning and some taking action, and I love profoundly the fact that she was driven by the love of her child and how she wanted a better life, and whoops, situations happened. And in here we will be following Amina as she will try to embark herself on this last quest, and you know, there's this promise of a lot of gold, and something terrible happens, and we see how Amina and her crew manages through that. This quest was so, again, vivid and almost funny, and sometimes her character and the ones of the crew were so good to follow, and it's a story that again reads incredibly easy, so also very good if you want to get into fantasy, because there's a lot of the good quests, those tropes of fantasy creatures, but it's done in a way that is just so easy to read. It was just such a delight. Top 4, we have a story that got me out of a reading slump. I was reading books and I was like, I don't believe I like reading anymore. Like,
what is reading? What is life?
And then I read this book, and from the beginning, although it is not necessarily super short, and it's a story that you see that the first installment being 500 pages long, it's just short because second book, it's like 800 pages, and it just third book 1000. So this story will unfold masterfully in a way that is going to become epic. But at the same time, from the beginning, you were able to see that it has this easiness of just get lost in the world, and it has the best things of reading fantasy while still being modern. It's something that quite reminded me a lot of reading Malice. It's a book that was kind of similar in the vibes. It also brought me some elements from Wheel of Time, and it made me really love reading again and fantasy, and I wanted to keep reading all of the time. I wake up early in the morning just to read it. I stayed up late at night, and I was fascinated by the characters. I like a lot of them. I was able to laugh but also to suffer. I am not super invested quite yet with all of the characters, but I know I'm gonna get there. And that book is Of Blood and Fire by Ryan Cahill. I know. This book, a lot of people recommended to me and like, you will love these. And I was like,
will I? I mean, I don't know.
Yes, I did. And you will as well. So please read these. It's a story that it has a lot of things that we know about. There's a lot of tropes that it's not new, but it feels like it is new. It blends things in a way that will just make your heart sing. It's perfect if you like Aragorn, and if you like Wheel of Time. Honestly, we will have this quest of these different friends that I just like one day, not knowing why, just thrown into this war, and then something happens that just consolidates that they are going to be part of this war, and they need to be on the flee. And you see how the stories unfold, how they are becoming adults, and how they need to face those situations. It's a book that really I will be continuing, and the pages just flew by. It's incredibly easy and really addictive. It's one of those stories that I was not able to put down, so definitely recommend if you want that. Why I love fantasy. This is why you love fantasy. Like, this is it. In position number 3 is a story that it's fantasy at its core. Once I finalized it, I wanted to clap, I wanted to cheer. It's fantasy at its best, and that was The Great Hunt by Robert Jordan, book 2 in the Wheel of Time series. It not only advanced the arc of the characters that I was already started to be invested in book 1, but also it transports me to such a different world. It broke that I drink from Tolkien in book 1, and I am doing a lot of things similarly, and I am now in book 2 creating something quite unique. I'm advancing in all of the different lines. I am letting you, the reader, know about different kinds of magic, of worlds, of angst. It is so good. I made a specific video about it, telling all of my feelings about this, so I won't get into detail, but honestly, I do recommend a lot getting into Wheel of Time if you haven't yet. Join me in this quest. I am reading 1 book per month with my Patreon, so if you want to join this read along, join us. I will link everything down below in the description. We are loving this journey, and I would love for you to join me. In position number 2, we have a sci-fi standalone that blew my mind and that I'm not able to forget. I know, or I've heard, that this was not the first book of this author, and I actually read another from this author that you've seen in this list, and that was pitched as the best, and it definitely has some elements that are similar, but this book, it completely took my sanity and broke it. I thought this was so very well done, not only the premise, but the fact that we are talking about the role of memories, and what if suddenly society could start having these memories that are not real. What is the role of memories to consolidate who we are in our lives? My goodness, like, it was so phenomenal. And that is Recursion by Blake Crouch. This story, it's fast-paced, it has 2 points of view, there's a thriller again, and I am fascinated about the brain, about neuroscience, and this is a story that sings to my heart and to my brain. I need everyone to read this, and I need to discuss this with you, so please give this one a go, or let me know if you've read it already. Top 1, we have a standalone from an author that is very well loved, and I love the craft of this author because she is this rare breed in which the stories are twisted but beautiful, and you see terrible, grey characters that are incredibly likable, and it is so mind-blowing. And in this case, we follow the main point of view of our character throughout her life. It's not a formula in books that I usually love, going back and forth, but in this case, being able to see that past and different ages, different times, and also blending it with what is honestly a love story, it just mesmerized me, and that is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V. Schwab. The first pages are really solid and are a great depiction of what is to come in the book. There are other stories that once that you started, you need to trust the process. But with this book, if you're hooked with the first 10 pages, you will be hooked with the whole story. So that's the only thing that I'm begging you to take. Just 10 pages, see if you like it, because I did. I was fascinated by the darkness, by the challenges, by the freedom, by the solitude, by the profound topics that the author allow us to see through the eyes of our character who wants freedom, and she makes a deal with the devil in order to live forever. But there's a trade-off, because she is not going to be remembered by anyone. And so that is a unique kind of freedom, but also it is such a toucher, because she's not able to do anything really to be remembered, and the most silly things we will also come to adore. And it made me really reflect about the solitude, about what life means, the power of our choices. And it's a kind of a sad but also beautiful story, but I just really recommend. I believe this is a story that will be for everyone. It really depends on what your mood, but if you want to give a good story a try, please pick this one up. And if you want to read more standalones as good as this one, I will link here my top 10 favorite standalones of all time, and let me know down below which have been your favorite books of this year, because I need more good recommendations.